In 1980, a film would be released that would go on to spawn 11 spin-offs, over a dozen comics, and help define the slasher genre, as well as go on to create one of horror's most beloved characters. How did the film get made? How did they achieve the groundbreaking gore in the film? And what actor in the film called the script a piece of shit? Let's talk about it. Hi, my name is Montgomery and welcome to Bloody Good. Today we're taking a look at Friday the 13th and the many roadblocks that the crew had to overcome to get the film made. Seeing the success of Halloween in 1978, director and producer Sean S. Cunningham wanted a slice of the horror pie and got work to create his very own horror slasher. He approached Victor Miller and proposed that they rip off Halloween. When writing the script, it had originally been titled A Long Night at Camp Blood. It was Cunningham who suggested the title change to Friday the 13th. However, before the script was complete, Cunningham was worried someone may steal his title and was desperate to get the film financed. So, without a complete script, Cunningham placed an advertisement in Variety using a logo he had commissioned to be made. To give you an idea of how fast Cunningham was moving to get this film made, it is reported that the script was written in just 2 weeks. In the original script, the film had no scene where Jason jumped out of the lake. In fact, the very idea was suggested by none other than Tom Savini, who was one of the first crew members hired thanks to his extensive work with George A. Romero and his many other horror projects. Talking about the ending, Savini said, "The whole reason for the cliffhanger at the end was I had just seen Carrie, so we thought that we needed a chair jumper like that, and I said, let's bring in Jason." The film was picked up and managed to secure a budget of roughly $550,000. This relatively low budget forced them to get creative when it came to the part of casting the leads. The film was cast in New York. Now, Cunningham had gone on record saying that he wasn't looking for great actors, but anyone who was likable and could play a somewhat responsible camp counselor. More importantly, Cunningham wanted actors who would look good, could read lines good enough, and most importantly, were cheap to hire. They ended up casting Kevin Bacon, Laurie Bartman, Peter Brower, and for the role of Alice, they had originally set up an open casting call to drum up more publicity for the film. In truth, Cunningham was really hoping to cast Sally Field, but quickly realised they would be unable to hire someone so well established, and instead cast the at the time unknown Adrienne King. For the role of Mrs. Voorhees, the script landed on the desk of Betsy Palmer, who promptly read the script and called it a piece of shit, refusing the role. However, later on, Palmer's car would break down, and since she needed $10,000 to purchase a new one, she agreed to do 10 days of shooting for $1,000 a day. Production officially began in September 1979. To find the location to be used for Camp Crystal Lake, the production settled on Camp Nobi Bo Co, located in New Jersey. The camp was primarily owned by the Boy Scouts of America, and production was allowed to use it as long as they made a sizable donation. Through the production, the majority of the cast and crew stayed in a local hotel. However, some of the crew elected to stay on location, immersing themselves in the story. This included Tom Savini and Tasso Stavrakis. Throughout the production, Cunningham and Miller would be constantly rewriting scenes on the fly. The weather was something the production was fighting with constantly, with many of the crew describing it as bitterly cold. The weather was so cold it resulted in the team being forced to rewrite the opening sequence in the film. In the original script, the young couple who were murdered were meant to be walking down the beach. However, the weather was so cold it actually snowed, making the beach unusable as it was, summer camp. The scene was rewritten instead to take place in a barn. But bad weather wasn't the only blight on the production. Money was tight, and I mean really tight. The production wasn't able to afford many lights, resulting in a lot of the scenes shot outdoor at night being incredibly dark. The film also lacked a budget for stunt doubles, forcing most of the young and inexperienced actors to perform their own stunts. This had some disastrous effects, such as the final fight scene between Mrs. Voorhees and Alice, which involved a numerous amount of sequences of them trading blows. King and Palmer decided that they would rehearse the sequence the night before, and during the rehearsal, Palmer slapped King across the face for real. Palmer had to have it explained to her that, unlike the stage, when you slap someone in the movie, you simply fake it. Now, one of the saddest scenes due to the behind-the-scenes info was during the sequence in the film where a snake appears in the cabin. The production killed a real snake on camera, and if that wasn't bad enough, the snake's handler had not been told about this. He was so distraught after being told the snake had been killed. Not cool, film. Not cool at all. For the effects that didn't depend on animal cruelty, we had the twisted mind of Tom Savini to thank. Savini was responsible for Marcy's axe wound to the face, the arrow penetrating Jack's throat, and he was also extremely involved in the effect earlier in the film where an arrow narrowly misses Brenda. Savini was actually the one to shoot the arrow that was hidden and guided by a hidden wire. For Kevin Bacon's famous and awesome death scene where he is stabbed through the throat with an arrow, Savini came up with an ingenious design to pull the effect off. They pulled this off using a prosthetic neck and having Bacon stick his head through the bed, causing him to sit in an awkward angle. During the scene, the machine designed to pump blood malfunctioned and risked ruining the entire shot. Luckily, thanks to the quick thinking of Stavrakis, he grabbed the pipe connected to the pump, ripped it out the machine, and used his own breath to blow the blood out, giving an amazing and eerily realistic effect. Although some effects could be saved, others couldn't. For Marcy's death, Savini originally intended it to be far more graphic, where the audience would see the axe grinding against her face. However, this didn't happen, as the axe would simply slide across the mold. This forced the filmmakers to instead just use a simple cutaway shot of the axe plunged into her face. And one effect would have disastrous results, affecting one of the actors. For Bill's death, fake arrows were created and attached to the actor's body. Now, not only were these arrows uncomfortable for the actor, but for the one that was attached to his eye, the solvent used to adhere the arrow to his closed eye temporarily blinded the actor in one of his eyes. For the final kill of Mrs. Voorhees' beheading, a mold was taken of Palmer's face, but the actual scene was filmed while the actor wasn't present, which is why she has some very manly heads during her decapitation. And while I have you, if you're enjoying this video, why don't you consider subscribing? We're trying to hit 10k by the end of the year, and if we hit 10k, I will cover a terrible, terrible horror film called Poultrygeist. To create the iconic soundtrack for the film that we all know and love, Harry Manfredini stepped up to the challenge. Manfredini gave himself strict rules to adhere to while he scored the film. The film would only play music when the killer was actually present, as to not manipulate the audience. For the classic Jason theme, the sound was taken from the dialogue in the film, where Mrs. Voorhees says, "Killer mummy," shortening the killer to and the mummy to. When the film's edit was complete, a bidding war to distribute the film started almost immediately between Paramount Pictures, Warner Brothers, and United Artists. However, it was Paramount that won the war, securing the domestic distribution rights. Paramount executive Frank Mancuso Sr. said when talking about the film, "The minute we saw Friday the 13th, we knew we had a hit." The confidence led to them to pay $1.5 million for the rights for the film. Friday the 13th was released on May 9th, 1990. Variety predicted the film was likely to flop, saying, "It has nothing to exploit but its title and whatever oomph Paramount put into the marketing campaign." However, Variety would end up eating its words, as the film was a major hit, obviously. Earning over $5 million against a $550,000 budget, the film ended its box office run earning over $59 million. And it was the 15th highest earning film in the USA in 1980. While the film was a financial hit, critically it had a wholly negative reception. The Los Angeles Times slammed the film, calling it silly, boring, youth-geared horror movie. The Baltimore Evening Sun piled on to the negativity, saying the film was a shamelessly bad film, but then Cunningham knows this. This is sad. And Variety, after attempting to herald the film's failure, called it low budget in the worst sense, with no apparent talent or intelligence to offset its technical inadequacies. Friday the 13th has nothing to exploit but its title. And one critic who was so angered by the film, Gene Siskel, went as far as spoiling the film's ending in his review in an attempt to sabotage the film, saying in his review that the film was one of the most despicable creatures ever to infest the movie business. While the film may have distressed critics and offended their artistic sensibilities, its financial success couldn't be ignored, and work immediately began on a sequel. Friday the 13th would go on to cement its legacy in horror, with Jason Voorhees becoming one of, if not the most iconic character in horror, spawning 11 different films, numerous video games, and comics. What do you think of Friday the 13th and its legacy in horror? Let me know in the comments down below, and if you're interested in the history of famous horror films, click the link on your screen right now to see how they made Texas Chainsaw Massacre and why the actors filmed one scene for 36 hours. And if you're interested in another horror film released the same year, we made a video covering an adaptation of Stephen King's The Shining. I've been Montgomery, this has been Bloody Good, and thank you so much for watching.